Good evening, parents. I'm here to speak to you about what's going to be covered on the end of Module 3 assessment for math. We're going to get started with just a few of the concepts. We're going to begin with having students explain whether or not there are enough spaces for the squares on the paper. So these are the squares or something similar to what I will provide, and these are the squares that will be there. So I'm going to give them these squares, and they're going to have to see or show me if there's enough space for these on the paper. So I will say, is there enough space on the paper for all of these squares? Show me how you know. So in an ideal world, this is exactly what the student will do. Are there enough? Yes, are there enough squares for the space? Yes, there are. And they did show me the proper way. However, there is a misconception that has occurred before, and this is something that a student could do. This is another option or another thing that a student may do when they're taking their test. So in this case, there's not enough space for the paper. There's not enough space on this paper for all of these squares because they were not placed in an order in which fits. So I will not be able to redirect or have them say, are you sure, or try again. This is something that they'd have to try on their own, try different ways, kind of like a puzzle. So that is something that we'll be working on. Is there enough space on this paper for all of these squares? Show me how you know. All right, so one of the next topics, we'll be talking about items. In this case, we will be using something similar to, let's use cube. We'll use cubes for now. So we'll do 5 cubes and 3 cubes. Are there enough yellow cubes for the 3 cubes? And again, I won't be using cubes, I will be using objects, so the wording is gonna sound a little weird, but I wanna know if they know what enough means. So enough means the same number. So are there enough yellow cubes for the orange cubes? Show me how you know. So the way that they can show how we know is they can put 1 cube for each. So they may take the orange cubes and put 1 at a time next to each cube. So they'll know, okay, here's 1 cube for this one. There's another cube there, and there's another cube. So in this case, they can know that there's 3 cubes and there's not enough. So a student in this case will show me that there are not enough. Again, we will not use cubes. They will be objects. So it may be a plate and a fork, or a plate and a spoon. It might be a pencil and a paper. They're different objects. We want to know if there are enough. So now we're going to ask the student to use the words more than to compare 2 objects. So I'm going to say, let's pretend the yellow cubes are paper, or a piece of paper, and the orange cubes are pencils. So I'm going to ask, use the words more than to compare the paper and the pencils. So in an ideal world, the student would say, there are more papers than pencils. And I'm going to ask them to use less than to compare the paper and the pencils, and they would say there are less pencils than there are paper, or there are less pencils than paper. Again, their wording does not have to be exact, as they have not built up the full vocabulary just yet. So as long as I can understand that, I can understand them and know that they know what the concept means, that is truly all that matters. That's going to be the first topic, which is going to be covered. The topic being covered is, are there enough? So again, for the vocabulary words, we will be using enough, more than, and less than for that first topic. Now, for the second topic, we're going to have 2 sets of cubes. So we'll have a 7-stick and a 5-stick. We'll have a 7-stick and a 5-stick. And we're going to ask, which set has more cubes? So the student will be able to say, oh, the 7-stick has more cubes than the 5-stick. Now I'm going to ask a student to make a set with the same number as any given number. So again, these will not be the same numbers. These will be different numbers, but I'm going to ask them to make the same number of cubes. So let's say I give them, I have the 7-stick. I have the 7 stick, and I'm going to give them some loose cubes. And I'm going to say, make a set that has the same number of cubes as the orange one. In an ideal situation, the student would make the same amount of cubes, so they'd make another 7 stick. And I'm going to ask the student what they're doing, so they should be explaining. In an ideal world, again, they would say, oh, I'm making a 7 stick because there are 7 cubes in the orange stick. So since you want the same number of cubes, I'm making another 7 stick. Anything that is any explanation they can give me that's understandable, or using mathematical vocabulary will be accepted. So I'm going to give them a set of 7, and I'm going to say, make a set. I'm going to give them loose cubes again, and I'm going to say, make a set that has 1 more than the orange set. Okay, so in ideal situations, the student does make the same set and then adds another one, or they count the first set and then know, okay, I have 7, 1 more is 8, and they make an 8 stick. So that's what that question says. Make a set that has 1 more than this set. That shows me that they know what 1 more means. Now, I'm going to give them the 7 stick, and yes, I'm going to give them the 7 stick, and I'm going to ask that they make a set that has 1 less cube than that stick. Okay, so sometimes the students just gauge by looking at each set, and they say, okay, this one, the orange one has 1 more, so they know that the yellow one has to be 1 less. Or sometimes they count the 7 stick and say, I have 7, 1 less is 6, and they make a 6 stick. Every child's thought process is different. That's what's going to be covered in the second topic, which is comparison of sets within 10. So please use the word sets. I did not include that word, vocabulary word, on the end of Module 3 checklist, but sets is a word that we are using. So instead of saying group, we're going to say set. So this set of cubes, that set of cubes, this set of objects, that set of objects. We've been using that word a lot, so I think they'll be fine, but please throw that in when you're using different objects. Again, because I'm sure you don't have the same materials or manipulatives at home, you can use anything else. You can use beans, so you can say, here's a set of 7 beans. Make a set with 1 less. Make a set with 1 more. You can do the same thing with rice, with corn kernels, anything that you may have at home, pencils, any objects, because again, the objects will vary from the test as long as they know these concepts. So in topic F, which would be comparison of sets within 10, they will be discussing more, which has more, the same number, and 1 more and 1 less. For the next topic, comparison of numerals. Okay, so in this case, we're going to have some loose cubes. And we're going to have 1 set of loose cubes, and then we're going to have another set of loose cubes. And I'm going to ask for the student to put the objects in lines to match and compare them. So if you're going to put objects in lines to match and compare them, that is pretty much using endpoints, lining them up at endpoints. Now it's very easy with cubes because we can connect them, and so we can be able to see, they can line them up in columns or even rows. It doesn't matter in which way, as long as they know how to compare them properly, which means matching it at an endpoint. So in this case, I see that they are matched at the end point, meaning that we can see that one clearly has more than the other. So we're going to take a look at these two objects and we're going to ask the student which one has more. So they might be able to point and say, this yellow one, I want them to give me a number. So which number is more? They're going to have to count the number. So in this case, we have the orange 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we have 8 and 1, 2, 3, 4. Which one is more? 8 is more. And which one is less? 4. So I'm also going to ask the student to use the words more than to compare the two numerals. So we've been doing that a lot. Specifically today, we practiced this a lot. 8 and 4. Use the words more than to compare these two numerals. 8 is more than 4 would be the ideal answer. And that would be it for topic G, comparison of numerals. And we're moving on to the very last topic, topic H, which is clarification of measurable attributes. In this case, we're going to measure items using a balance scale. So I'm not sure if you can see the balance scale clearly, although, so this is the balance scale that we use in the room. There we go. So that's the balance scale that we use in the room, and this is what they will be using to measure the weight of their items. Now, we will be using a lot of vocabulary for this particular topic. We'll be comparing the length. And so I'm going to ask them, compare the length of this item to that item. So we can say compare the length of this item to this item. Okay. So I'm going to say use your words. So first of all, I'm going to check to see are the objects lined up at the endpoint? Okay, and I see that they are not in this particular case, which a lot of students do. They don't do it completely at the line, which is why it's sometimes inaccurate. Now, in this case, I can see that the line is all the way to the bottom, so the endpoints do match. And I'm going to ask the student, compare the length of this phone to this paper. Use your words. And again, I will be using different objects. Use your words to compare the length of these two objects. In an ideal world, the student will say, the phone is longer than the paper, or the paper is shorter than the phone, which is, both of those answers are fine. And so that would be the topic for, or the question for length. Now we're going to compare weight also, and we're going to use two objects. They could be the same objects or different objects. They will use the balance scale to be able to weigh the objects. And they will have to use their words and say, the phone weighs more than the paper, or the paper weighs less than the phone. Also, we're going to compare the weight of objects to weight of cubes. In this case, the way that we teach students to see how many cubes weigh the same as objects, we have them, or they know that they should be adding 1 cube at a time until the scale is balanced. Now, this was a topic that we had students had difficulty with in the mid-module 3 assessment. So this is definitely something that we will practice in class, as I know that we typically do not have balance scales at home. So again, students should be adding cubes one at a time until the scale is balanced evenly in order to know how many cubes weigh the same as any object that I present. Now, it's also important for students to use their words, as that is those points account for many of this exam. So again, use your words to tell me. So I would say, for example, this paper weighs, or 7 cubes weigh the same as this paper, or 25 cubes weigh the same as this phone, or 4 cubes weigh the same as this pencil. The student should be able to use those words specifically. Blank weighs the same as blank, or blank weighs the same as 7 cubes. Now, students may not use the balance scale right off the bat, which is something that I noticed during the mid-module assessment, but they sometimes make a pretty good guess. And so if they do make a guess, I will encourage them to use the scale to try it out, but it's best if they know how they can find the answer by adding 1 at a time. Now, the last thing we're going to cover for topic H, which is measurable attributes, is going to be capacity. Please go over the word capacity again. Capacity means space, how much space something has, how much it holds. So I will find two different objects and ask the student to compare the capacity of one with the other. So for example, I might say, this cup, compare the capacity of this cup to this bowl. The student should be able to say, this cup has less capacity than the bowl, or this bowl has less capacity than the cup. The student should be able to have that full sentence. If they aren't able to articulate any of the sentences that I've laid out or that I've stated, then that is where they would be losing points, as articulating their thoughts is a very, very big part of this curriculum, which is important because it also helps them with their thought process, as well as it ends up being able to translate through their writing as well. So this is it for the end of Module 3 assessment review. I truly hope that you find it helpful, and if you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to give me to send me a message through Remind, and I can address any concern you may have before we get closer to our testing date. Thank you for your time and have a great day.